She raised her glass, smiled at the room, and said, "At least I'm not a divorced nanny." The laughter hit harder than the words. Everyone, my parents, her friends, even some of mine, laughed like it was just a joke, like I hadn't just been gutted in front of 50 people. I was frozen, not because I couldn't speak, but because if I did, I knew I'd cry, and I refused to let her have that. I looked over at my son. He was sitting beside my mother, confused, too young to understand, but old enough to feel something was wrong. Then Eli stood up, my sister's fiancé, the man she was going to marry in 2 weeks. He didn't look angry. He looked like he had finally made a decision. He walked over to me, took my hand in his, and said something that shut the whole room up. "She's the reason I'm alive today." Gasps. Silence. Then he walked out, but not before dropping her engagement ring on the table. And my sister? She started crying. I never wanted to go to the engagement party, that's the truth. I tried to convince myself it was just anxiety, just nerves. But deep down, I knew what it really was. I didn't want to be put on display. I didn't want to walk into that beautifully lit magazine-perfect backyard and feel like the cautionary tale everyone whispers about. But I went. I put on the blue dress that still fit me after the divorce. I pulled my hair back the way Benji likes. In a low twist, he says, makes me look like a princess. I painted on the kind of smile you learn to wear after spending too many nights crying alone in your car. The party was held at my parents' house in San Diego. They'd gone all out. String lights in the trees, a bar with handcrafted cocktails, a live jazz duo playing soft background music. Everything looked perfect. Everything always does when it comes to Callie. Callie is my younger sister by 6 years. She's tall, thin, impossibly polished. The kind of woman who speaks in bullet points and wins arguments with a smile. She's also the kind of person who knows how to cut you with a compliment. And I've been bleeding from those cuts for years. My parents had always made room for her brilliance. She was valedictorian, a college graduate at 21, and vice president of marketing by 28. She wore confidence like perfume. Everyone noticed when she walked in a room. I, on the other hand, had a baby at 27, quit my job to raise him, and then watched my marriage fall apart while I worked days as a nanny and nights cleaning Airbnb rentals just to cover groceries. People called me resilient. They meant I looked tired. Still, I came to her party. I came because Benji wanted to go. He loves his Aunt Callie. She buys him noisy toys and lets him eat candy for dinner when he visits. He doesn't know about the things she's said. He doesn't see the looks. To him, she's just fun. I came because my mother asked me to. She said, please, just be there. It would mean a lot. I knew what she meant. She didn't want any tension. She wanted both of her daughters in one photograph. And if I'm being honest, I came because of Eli. Eli was Callie's fiancé. He was warm in a way that didn't announce itself. Quiet. Observant. The first time I met him, he asked me how I was. And when I said, fine, he waited, like he knew I wasn't. No one ever does that. There had been a moment, a year ago, before he and Callie got serious. We were at a family barbecue, standing alone in the kitchen while everyone else was outside. He asked me how I was doing after the divorce. I said, I don't know how to start over. He looked me in the eyes and said, you already did. That was it. One sentence. But I thought about it for days. Then he started dating Callie, and I buried that feeling. Deep. At the party, I stood near the back. I kept my hands on Benji's shoulders as he watched the musicians. I watched people flit around with their drinks, trading success stories and vacation plans. I stayed quiet. I smiled. I let myself fade into the edges. When Callie walked out with Eli to make their toast, she was radiant. She wore a white cocktail dress that probably cost more than my month's rent. She took the mic with ease, laughing, thanking everyone, saying she couldn't believe how lucky she was to be marrying such a perfect man. And then she looked at me. It was only for a second, but I felt it, that flicker of mischief. I knew something was coming. I just didn't know it would be that cruel. Some of us took different paths, she said. I climbed the ladder, and Nora, well, she became a divorced nanny, but hey, at least I'm not both. The crowd laughed, loudly, naturally, the way people do when they think a joke is harmless. But it wasn't harmless. It was a knife, and she twisted it with a smile. My mother looked horrified. My father raised his eyebrows but said nothing. Eli didn't laugh. He looked at me and I looked away. Because I felt it again. That sting. That old familiar shame. And I knew, no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, that this night had already taken a turn. The laughter didn't last long, but it lasted long enough. Long enough for my son to look up at me with wide, uncertain eyes. Long enough for my mother to shift in her seat and pretend to sip her wine. Long enough for Callie to bask in the moment she had created, my humiliation delivered with charm, masked as wit. I stood still, trying to keep the heat in my face from rising to my eyes. I focused on Benji. His innocence was my anchor. He reached up and held my hand, maybe sensing the silence around us had changed. "Why did they laugh, Mama?" he asked. I squeezed his hand and smiled down at him, because sometimes grown-ups forget to be kind. Callie continued her toast, completely unbothered. She thanked our parents, she made a joke about Eli leaving his socks around the house, and she ended with a glowing tribute to their future together. Everyone clapped, people raised glasses. Someone shouted, "To the bride!" I didn't move, I couldn't. My father avoided my gaze. That told me everything. He loved Callie's ambition. He loved that she made him look good. When I dropped out of grad school to raise Benji full-time, he stopped asking me about my plans. Eli stood beside her, stiff, eyes not on the crowd but on me. I noticed the way his jaw clenched when Callie said my name, the way his hand left hers after she made the joke. He didn't laugh. He didn't smile. He just stood there like he was watching a train crash in slow motion. I didn't expect him to defend me. This was her party, her stage, her moment. But a part of me wanted someone to say something, to acknowledge that I had just been made a punchline. My brother, Micah, walked up to me a few minutes later. He's younger than me, but he's always been protective. He leaned in and whispered, "You okay?" I nodded. He glanced toward the head table and said, "She's always been like this. You know that." I nodded again because I did know. This wasn't new. Callie had spent her life making me the comparison she used to feel better about herself. She didn't hate me. She didn't love me either. I was just a mirror she used to keep her reflection clean. Micah sighed. "If it makes you feel better, she's losing points with Eli, fast." I looked at him. "What do you mean?" "He hasn't taken his eyes off you since the toast." I didn't know how to respond to that. I didn't want to. I didn't want to believe that any part of Eli's gaze could be about anything more than sympathy. I didn't want to hope for something I couldn't afford to want, but I felt it too. That quiet tension humming in the space between us. I watched Eli from the corner of my eye. He whispered something to Callie. She smiled, nodded, and turned back to her friends. Eli didn't sit back down. Instead, he stepped away from the head table and started moving toward me. My stomach dropped. He walked past guests, through clusters of laughter and clinking glasses, and stopped in front of me like he had rehearsed it. "You okay?" he asked, voice low, eyes searching mine. I wanted to lie. I wanted to say yes, but I didn't. "No," I said. His face softened. "I'm sorry she did that." "She's your fiancé," I said. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "That doesn't mean I agree with her." We stood there for a beat, the noise of the party muffled by whatever passed between us. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't nostalgic. It was something more dangerous, truthful. "You shouldn't have come," he said. "I didn't want to," I admitted, but I thought maybe this time would be different. He nodded like he understood something deeper than I was willing to say. Callie called out to him from across the patio, her voice sugary and light. "Eli, baby, come take photos." He looked over, then back at me. "I'll be right there." I watched him walk away, but something in me had shifted. Something about the way he looked at me, the way he didn't laugh, the way he stood between me and her words. It stirred a part of me I thought I had buried. I didn't know what was coming next, but I could feel it building. The air had changed. The night wasn't over, not even close. The rest of the party blurred around me. People moved on from the toast like it had never happened. They filled their glasses, posed for pictures, and laughed at stories I wasn't part of. But something had cracked under the surface, and I could feel it widening. I didn't eat. I didn't drink. I sat on the edge of the garden wall while Benji ran in circles around a fountain. He had found another kid to play with, which was a gift. It gave me room to breathe. Eli never came back to our side of the patio. I watched him standing beside Callie in the photo line, his hand loose in hers, his smile strained. She kept fixing her hair, tilting her head toward him, adjusting his jacket like a stylist instead of a fiancé. He looked like a man being posed for a life he wasn't sure he wanted anymore. Every time our eyes met, I looked away. Not out of guilt, but confusion. What was I supposed to do with whatever was happening between us? What did it mean that he had come to me after the toast, that he had stood in front of me like a shield? I had spent years silencing my instincts to keep the peace. I stayed quiet in my marriage when I should have spoken up. I kept things inside because I thought that made me strong, but I was tired of strength being measured by how much I could endure without breaking. So I stood up. I walked to the edge of the patio and took one slow breath, then another. I didn't plan to say anything. I didn't plan anything at all, but I found myself walking toward Eli. He saw me first. He stepped out of the photo line before I reached him. Callie looked confused, then annoyed. She followed his gaze and saw me walking up. I stopped a few feet away, not wanting to cause a scene, but needing clarity. "I don't want this to be a thing," I said. "Whatever you're feeling, whatever that was earlier, I don't want it to become some kind of fallout you'll regret tomorrow." He looked at me like he was studying the truth behind my eyes. "I won't regret it." I swallowed hard. "She's your future. You're building a life together." "No," he said. "She's building an image. I've just been standing in the frame." That hit harder than I expected. "She loves you in her way," I said. "She loves the version of me that looks good beside her," he replied. "But you saw the version of me no one else did, and you didn't look away." His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't rushed. It was quiet and steady, the way a person sounds when they've made peace with a decision long before they say it out loud. "I don't want to blow up your life," I said. He shook his head. "You saved it." I blinked, unsure how to answer that. He stepped closer. 2 years ago, in that park, when I was at my lowest, you didn't treat me like I was broken. You sat with me. You listened. No one else knew what I was going through, and you didn't need to know everything to care. You just stayed." "That wasn't a big deal," I said. "It was the biggest deal. I was ready to give up. You gave me a reason not to." I didn't realize I was crying until I felt the tears on my lips. I wiped them quickly, but he didn't flinch. He didn't turn away. He just stood there, holding the silence like it was something sacred. Callie's voice cut through it. "Eli," she said from behind him, "what's going on?" He turned, but he didn't answer her. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out the ring box, and opened it. The world slowed. He looked at the ring, then at Callie. "I can't marry someone who thinks cruelty is clever." He turned back to me. "I'm sorry it took me this long." Then he closed the box, walked over to the table, and placed it down. Callie stood frozen. Her eyes welled up, but no words came out. I had never seen her speechless before. It was like the oxygen had been sucked out of her lungs. I didn't say anything. I didn't gloat. I didn't move. Eli gave me one last look, one that said everything and promised nothing, and walked out the front gate. After Eli walked out, the silence clung to everything. It was loud in its own way. No one knew what to say. The clinking glasses had stopped. The conversations fizzled. Even the jazz band hesitated between songs, unsure whether to keep playing. Callie stood at the center of it all, still in her white cocktail dress, frozen like a performer whose stage lights had been cut. Her hand hung in the air where Eli's had just been. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. The woman who always had a clever reply, always knew what to say, suddenly looked like a stranger in her own show. My parents looked stunned. My father's jaw was tight, his arms crossed over his chest like he could physically block out the embarrassment. My mother blinked rapidly, clutching her wine glass, clearly desperate to rewind the entire evening. They didn't move toward me. They didn't move toward her. They just stood there, waiting for someone else to make sense of what had just happened. But there was no making sense of it, not in the way they wanted. I knelt beside Benji, who had wandered back to me when the energy shifted. He looked up at me and whispered, "Is he coming back?" I shook my head. "Not tonight, baby." Callie finally broke. Her shoulders dropped, and she let out a single, sharp sob, then another. She backed away from the table, clutching her chest like the moment had physically hit her. One of her friends rushed over and put an arm around her, whispering something no one else could hear. A few others followed, surrounding her like a barrier, as if her pain needed protection. She didn't look at me. Not once. I stayed where I was, holding Benji's hand, feeling the full weight of everything that had just happened. Not triumphant, not vindicated, just hollow. Not because I wanted Eli to stay, but because this wasn't how I wanted the truth to come out. I never wanted to be at the center of someone else's heartbreak, not even hers. Micah came over and crouched next to me. He didn't speak right away. Then he said, "That was insane." I gave a small laugh through my exhaustion. "Yeah, it really was." "You okay?" I nodded. "I think so." "She had it coming, you know." "Maybe, but it still hurts." Micah exhaled. "I don't think he did it to hurt her. I think he did it to finally tell the truth." I looked at my brother, grateful for the clarity. For the first time that night, someone understood it wasn't about drama. It was about being seen. Guests started leaving. A few said awkward goodbyes to my parents. Some gave me sympathetic glances without stopping to speak. Others pretended they had early mornings. The patio emptied like someone had pulled the drain in a bathtub. Callie disappeared into the house with her circle of friends. My parents stayed behind to thank people for coming, their smiles tight, their words robotic. I didn't stay to help. I didn't stay to explain. I picked up Benji and kissed the top of his head. "Let's go home, buddy." He yawned and rested his head on my shoulder. "Can we get pancakes tomorrow?" "You bet." As I walked through the gate, my mother called after me. "Nora," she said. "Wait." I turned. She walked over, heels clicking across the stone path. She looked tired, older than she had 2 hours ago. "I didn't know she was going to say that," she said. "I did," I answered. Her face fell. She searched for something to say, then gave up. She reached out and touched Benji's back instead. "Drive safe," she said. I nodded. "Good night, Mom." When I got home, I put Benji to bed and sat on the edge of the couch, still in my dress, still trying to process what had just happened. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I felt clean, like something heavy had finally been washed off my skin. There was an envelope on my doormat the next morning. No name on it. Inside was a note written in careful, slanted handwriting. "You saved me. You always did. I'm sorry it took me this long to say it. Eli." I read it twice, then folded it and tucked it into a drawer. Not because I needed it, not because I was waiting for him, but because sometimes the truth deserves to be kept. The next few days moved slowly, like my world had shifted slightly on its axis, and I was waiting for everything to settle. I didn't hear from Callie, not a call, not a text, nothing. But that didn't surprise me. We had always been close in blood, distant in spirit. My parents didn't mention the party when they came to pick Benji up for his weekend visit. My mother brought homemade soup and my father handed me a bottle of wine, like an apology neither of them could speak out loud. I accepted both. I wasn't angry with them. I wasn't looking for an apology. I just didn't want to pretend anymore. Eli didn't come back. He didn't knock on my door or try to explain himself. After the note, there was silence, and I was thankful for it. Because he had already given me what I didn't realize I needed. He had told the truth. He had looked at me in front of a room full of people and said I mattered. Not because I was strong or resilient or good at enduring pain, but because I had once sat with him in the dark without asking for anything in return. That small moment, the one I had buried so deeply, turned out to be the one that changed everything. I wasn't in love with Eli. Not really. I had cared for him, maybe more than I let myself admit, but what I felt now wasn't longing. It was relief. Because for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was apologizing for my own life, for being divorced, for being a mother, for being a nanny. I used to flinch when people asked what I did for a living. I would lower my voice and say, "I'm just a nanny," like it was something to be ashamed of. But not anymore. Because what I do matters. I'm trusted with children. I hold space for families. I show up. I protect. I love. That is not small. That is not weak. And if someone wants to make a joke at my expense, they're not laughing because I've failed. They're laughing because they can't see the strength it takes to rebuild a life alone. Callie still hasn't spoken to me. She's grieving in her own way, and maybe she doesn't know how to be vulnerable without dressing it up in sarcasm. I don't hate her. I don't even wish her pain. I just wish she understood that loving someone doesn't mean making them feel small to lift yourself up. Micah called me the following week. "You good?" he asked. "I'm getting there," I said. Callie's been locked in her apartment. Mom keeps dropping off food. "She'll be okay." "She will," he said. Then, "You know you were the only one who didn't flinch when she said that joke?" "I flinched," I said. "I just didn't let her see it." He paused. "You looked like a damn superhero." I laughed at that, not because I felt heroic, but because it was the first time I had heard someone describe me that way, and in that moment it felt true. Benji and I went out for pancakes the following Sunday. It's our new tradition. He likes extra whipped cream. I like watching him enjoy something without thinking about bills or work or what anyone thinks of me. While we were eating, he looked up and said, "Mama, are you happy?" I didn't rush to answer. I took a breath and said, "I think I'm learning how to be." That was the truth. Not every story ends in romance. Not every betrayal gets justice. But some stories end with clarity, with stillness, with the simple, quiet realization that you are finally standing in your own life and you're no longer afraid of it. People saw me fall apart, but they also saw me stand back up, and that's the part they'll remember. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is not fight back. It's not prove them wrong. It's to keep going, to keep showing up, to keep being exactly who you are. No apologies, no shame. That's the real victory. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated, laughed at, or pushed aside, I hope it reminded you that your worth isn't measured by someone else's opinion. You are not your job title. You are not your mistakes. You are not what someone says about you when they're holding a microphone. You are the quiet strength that keeps showing up, even when no one claps for you. If you felt something while watching this, please take a second to like the video. It really helps more people find stories like this one. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that they matter. Maybe it's your sister, your friend, or maybe it's you. I'd love to hear your story in the comments. I read everyone, and your voice matters here. And if you want more real, raw, honest stories about resilience, truth, and the moments that shape us, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. There's more to come. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stand still and let the truth speak for itself.